Look at all these crystals. Final Fantasy 1 through 7. Today on... Everybody, hello and welcome to Press B to Cancel, your one-stop shop for whatever the fuck we're talking about today.
What are we talking about today?
Well, I'm glad you asked, disembodied voice of Paul 109. Today it is Final Fantasy 1 through 7, as I just recently streamed a marathon of these 7 games, and I can't wait to talk about it. But before we do, let's introduce ourselves. Let's start with you, Paul 109.
Hi, I'm Paul 109.
And with us also is Sick Jake.
Hey, I'm Sick Jake. Thanks for having me back.
Wait, you left?
Well, yeah, you know, that second career I had in Vegas. Remember Stomp? Changed my name, Rupert.
Oh.
I was all the rage on TMZ for like at least a week. But I'm out of rehab and I'm back at Press B.
You're that Cornelius guy, okay.
Hey, don't dox me.
Guy? Are we family?
Yes, we're related.
Where's Werewolf? He's not here today, right?
Hi. Hey, guys.
That was actually pretty good.
That's an oddly accurate impression, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, never mind. That's fine.
Yeah, you lost me.
The illusion is shattered.
Damn, I thought that was the best part of it all. That's the one I was saving for.
No, from what I've heard, though, Werewolf is retired from entertaining on podcasts and has relocated to Tuscaloosa to become a bluegrass singer.
Why is it never green grass? Like, I don't have blue and grass in my yard.
Oh, well, it's Kentucky. Kentucky is known to have blue-colored grass. Bluegrass.
Okay. I thought they were known for chicken. Okay, anyways, let's probably stick to the topic here.
So instead of dead south, he's what? Uppity north?
Life support, central. Not Central America, that's not right.
That's a whole other kind of grass.
Undead North.
Dead North.
No, Undead North. Zombie North.
Final Fantasy 1 through 7. I know we've already talked about Final Fantasy kind of in like a speedrun scenario before, but I just recently, and by recently I mean it's taken me 5 fucking months, have played Final Fantasies 1 through 7. Now, most of these, embarrassingly, I've never played. 1, I never finished. 2, I'd never even seen. 3, I never finished. 4, I grew up playing and loved. 5, I'd never played or seen. 6, I loved, and 7, I loved. So, really just 3 out of those 7. And every time I thought about playing a different one, I got mad that it wasn't Final Fantasy 4, and I just went back and played 4.
Wait. So me and you did a mini cast together on the games, and we both didn't play them all?
Oh, that's not a first.
Okay, well, good enough.
I've only played about 15% of the games that I say I've played.
Deep research is a well-known trait of those on Press B to Cancel.
Well, of course.
Available on Stitcher, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else like to listen to your favorite shows.
Is that a cat or a kid?
Is that my cat you can hear?
Or your kid, we're really not sure.
I swear, I tell you, I can't win, man. Either my kids are pounding my door, or it's my cat. I can close the door, but then you're probably going to hear scratching. What do you think? What do you think my odds are? Should I try?
Will it be your cat or will it be your kids?
They'll team up on me. Hold on a second. I can close the door.
I want to place it like ante of or bid or wager. That's it. I want to wager like 6 Starburst.
I'd ask you which kind, but they all taste the same.
They're not Fruit Loops. All right. Anyways, GP, what are we talking about?
Yeah, we'll get started. What I'll do is we'll separate these, of course, by game. I will start off by giving a brief rundown of the uniqueness of that game compared to the rest of the series, and I will list what I think are its strengths and weaknesses, and then you bros can tell me where I'm wrong and where I'm right. Like, oh, well, you're wrong because you're an idiot, GP, clearly. Or, yeah, that's a good point, GP, but you're still an idiot. Those are kind of the 2 categories.
Okay, so we're going to be objective or objective?
You be whatever you want.
Gotcha.
Okay, so Final Fantasy 1. Amazing history to this game, which we don't have time for. Damn it. But no, it is it's the original. I have always been impressed with how big this game was. Now, as mentioned, I had never beaten this one until the marathon. I had started it and thought it's an 8-bit video game. It's not going to be that big. And then once I started to see that, yes, in fact, it is big, I turned it off and played Final Fantasy IV. It's a great game. It is very grind heavy, but it offers enough places that you can grind that are worthwhile without becoming boring, considering what it accomplished as an 8-bit game, both story-wise, mechanics-wise. I thought it was great. Not much in the character development, as at the beginning you can just choose the 4 different people in your party, what job class they'll have. And they don't really talk too much about who they are as characters. You just go through as these 4 warriors of light trying to stop a bad guy named Chaos. There's a time loop involved, which by the time you beat him, he's a chump, by the way, you've closed the time loop paradox, so everybody survives, the world moves on, but nobody knows that you were the 4 warriors of light who saved the world.
See, it's been years since I played that game, and I don't remember that at all. I don't remember any plot from the game at all. I just remember it being fun for the choice of classes you have at the beginning.
Well, yeah, there's the job classes, which is great. The music, by the way, it's chiptunes or whatever, it's old school music. But what it accomplished with just the bare bones stuff, the music and the game, both fantastic. In my humble but infinitely correct opinion.
The job classes were a little bit lax for me because it's like, okay, you got warrior, wanting to outfit 4 warriors, you can do, but it's not very cost efficient. And they don't have any plumbers, they don't have any electricians, they don't have any carpenters. I was really pissed, so it took me about 20 years to get around to playing it proper.
See, I think that brings me to my major point with any criticisms that I have of this. Any criticisms that I have of this game are compared to the rest of the Final Fantasy series. If it's 1989 or whatever, and the game comes out, and there are no other Final Fantasies, you have nothing to compare it to. I would say this would be like a 9 out of 10 game under that lens. You know what I mean? It's like, it's brand new. It's a different way of playing, a different way of thinking, new challenges, new story, new all that.
And I think dare you use logic in our podcast?
I know that's probably the most educated thing I'll ever say video game wise. But that's my take on it. I think it achieved a lot with story, but not so much with character development.
How do you find the graphics in the game?
With your eyes. Next.
Yes. Well, okay. Because we did an episode not that long ago about ugly games, right? Mm-hmm. And you said this game you didn't like the graphics. You thought it was ugly.
Yes.
How could it be a 9 out of 10 on Nintendo if it's ugly?
Well, again, the 9 out of 10 comes out of the lens of we haven't seen anything like this before. To call it ugly compared to Final Fantasy VII or compared to Final Fantasy, 14, yeah, it's fugly. But to look at it, each of your characters in these little squares, the bad guys inside their own little pane with a black background, and then, of course, there's a little bit of terrain background at the top of the screen. Everything is segmented. Nothing feels very, not congealed, but, it's not a very... Everything just kind of has its own box. But if you go back and play updated versions, like they've done, with porting it on the PlayStation 1 or mobile, then yes, they've updated the landscapes to be more lush or more barren, depending on where you're at. And those, that negates that. But, again, if it's fresh RPG eyes in 1989, it is no longer a fugly game, and we can go back to making fun of the Atari.
Oh, hey, Atari's great. Oh, you're hurt me where it hurts. I feel attacked.
That's a different episode.
Yeah. I think that you're right about the black background on the combat window. That's kind of, But I thought the sprites of the monsters was great. Each of the classes looked very distinct. And that the style of like the black mage and the white mage, that's something that started the first game and carried through the entire franchise. And I love that.
Yeah, I would agree. And then if you look at the big bosses, Chaos, Tiamat, like the elemental fiends, Lich, those are very cool.
Yeah, I was about to say the enemy sprite, like the enemy boss sprites, I think are fucking cool. Like even going back, they're simplified, but if you see it and then you see one of the later versions, like the later remakes that they've done or updates or something along the way, every time they make the final boss, you can tell it's the final boss. You can see it's always like this higher resolution version of the same thing. Like they had enough detail in the original that it's like, okay, we just need to polish this, and that's all it was. So they never really had to make new sprites so much as just polish the ones they had. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Let's move on to 2. Is that okay? Again, for what it was, I think it accomplished a lot. And it's best if you're thinking about taking up Final Fantasy as a series and you've never played them or seen them before, definitely start with the first one and be patient.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's one of my favorite games as a kid. Like it kicked off my love with RPGs when I was younger. It's like it's either the first or second RPG I ever played. The other one was Dragon Warrior, and this game is way better than Dragon Warrior. So I think it's a great game. Definitely a classic.
I got to say the box art for it, the label for it, awesome. Also,
Yes.
the player's manual it came with was great, and it had the inserts of like the world map and the bestiary on the back, which is very, very cool.
That was the one with the black box and like the shield and the sword, I think it was.
Right inside like a glass ball.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
I want to say one thing before we go on to the second one is that you said this would be the first one you want to play. I think you should go with the 8th one. We're not going to get into that why. I think we've talked to a bit. We've probably talked it to death already, but play 8 first.
Okay. but realize if you're playing 8 first, we're going to, take a step back in graphics, but massive leaps forward in gameplay and storytelling. Okay, so on to 2. Final Fantasy 2, other than 8, is kind of the shitting post for the franchise in the eyes of a lot of people. And I will admit I was curious but not looking forward to trying the game because of its insanely negative reputation. My experience now having played it is that it was not as bad as I expected. To kind of summarize it all, there are 4 characters brought together by being orphaned by the big bad Empire. So there's a major theme that you're going to see in future Final Fantasies as well. The evil Empire that, ran through this town, killed a lot of the townsfolk. 4 of these kids who are now orphaned. One of them, I think, has an IQ that's very small. They named him Guy. I'm still salty about it. And so you get a little bit of character development from that. This game is loathed by many because of insane grind requirements. This is a muscle-building game. By that, I mean, if you want your character to be a strong magic user, you use magic over and over and over and over. If you want somebody to be a strong warrior, you just hit everybody over and over and over and over. So it is just building the one particular muscle that you want for any character to have. Yes, it's cool that any character can be anything that you want, but the amount of time that it takes in order to achieve any sort of gains that are noticeable is insane. I went into the game blind, however, people did tell me it's a grind fest and you're going to want to get some time in grinding because of the way it works before you play. I spent 14 hours off stream grinding before starting the game, and that made the game much more tolerable. The story is fine. Again, it's about the evil empire. There is a mechanic in the game where when you speak to people, certain words are highlighted and you need to memorize or learn those words and then speak those words to certain people throughout the game, which is pretty cool and unique. However, to my opinion, even more so of a weakness than the grindfest aspect of the game is that no matter what you do, you can go off and run halfway across the world just to have a conversation with one person who then says, oh, you should go back to the first town and speak to the princess. And you have to do that like 60 times. There's like all these different things. Well, let's go talk to Sid, the engineer, who's over in this part of the world. You do that and he's like, oh, here's a couple words. Go talk to the princess. And you hightail it back to the main city, talk to the princess who sends you on the next place to go just to return a few minutes later. What do you guys think?
That's interesting. Have you ever played Morrowind, GP, or no?
No, I have not.
So the reason I bring it up is in Morrowind, it's a classic PC game in the Elder Scrolls series, and I love that game. But what you just described with the muscle building, Morrowind's the same way. If you want to be a mage, cast more of that spell. You want to be a necromancer, cast death spells. Want to be a warrior, swing your sword. You want to jump higher, fall off buildings. Like literally that same mechanic.
Yeah, they did that in Oblivion as well.
Right. But with Morrowind also, the dialogue system, because there's no vocal dialogue, it's a text box. And it's all keyword based. So when you're talking to somebody, someone will mention like Thieves Guild in their paragraph. You click Thieves Guild, and he'll give you some information about the Thieves Guild. It sounds very similar to Final Fantasy II. I wonder if there's any inspiration between the two companies at all.
I don't know. Paul, what's your take on 2?
I never played it. I remember having it on PS1, I think it was, maybe. There was like a re-release kind of deal, and I didn't touch it. I started playing the first one, and then I put it down. I was like, no, I'm good. I just went on to something else, and then I lost my copy of it. I don't know if I sold it or someone stole it or whatever, but it disappeared into the ether, and now I kind of want to play it because what you said.
The version that we played was the Game Boy Advance version. I do have on a multi-cart the original NES graphics. I may go back at some point and play it on that just to experience it the way it was experienced or meant to be, in the original version. 2 other things I want to mention. There's a recurring name in the series of Final Fantasy named Sid. He's typically an engineer and or horny old curmudgeon type. Think Master Roshi, but for Final Fantasy. Sid, I believe, is introduced for the first time in 2. I could be mistaken. If he's in 1, I don't remember it, but he's definitely in 2 as the airship engineer. Also, chocobos. These giant birds that you can ride like a horse to get you around the map are introduced in Final Fantasy II, complete with, as of the Game Boy Advance version I played, the famous chocobo song.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I've never played this one either. Would you say it's worth playing for the story?
For the story, yes.
Okay.
If you are of the type of player who is patient, or if you have an emulator that you can fast forward, the grinding is absolutely, tolerable.
Okay.
But if it's not something that you're a big fan of, then no. Now, also a couple things. This is a very easy game to become OP'd in, so long as you have the time to grind away, for one. As I mentioned, if you want to become a stronger fighter, you just whack away at things. That does not necessarily have to be the bad guys. If you've got a bad guy that you can hit in one hit, take some time just whacking away at the rest of your party. Once they're dead, kill the thing, and you will have massively leveled up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Also, there are some OP'd weapons about midway to maybe 60% of the way through the game, if I remember correctly. And if you have the time and patience and a pen and paper, you can cheat the little mini game that you have to play to get all the OP'd stuff. And then you can just replicate that, and everybody can be as strong as you need them to be with their weapons. So,
is this the game that had Onion Knights in it?
No, this wasn't Onion Knights, but like there's the Masamune or whatever it's called. And you get it by completing a certain memory game. Like cards or tiles that are flipped over, and there's like, oh, here's a picture of a frog. And then you have to find the matching frog. Well, there's 30 or 31 different sets. So if you write down which position each frog is in, reinitiate the game, and then immediately quit and do that 30 times, you'll be back at the original one. So if you can complete that game, that memory game, with 0 mistakes, you'll get a lot of money and a lot of overpowered items. So again, if you just have the patience and wherewithal to write it down and keep track of the 30 different times, there's no reason to not have everybody just maxed out. You know what I mean?
Huh.
Nice.
So again, it's all based on, do you care enough to do that? Which, if you want to focus on just the gameplay, grind away as heavy as you can before the story even starts, and then get the weapons halfway through, and then yes, I think it's an enjoyable experience. But it takes a big investment with those 2 things alone. So,
well, I'm sold. 15 hours of grinding, sign me up.
and honestly, my last thing to say about this game is I think the reason it's so hated is because of the title Final Fantasy. I think if this had been a standalone RPG title, people would have yeah, it was good, but I think because people go back and play it, who maybe didn't grow up with it because it was never really brought over to America, they'll go back and play it now that they're adults and know the rest of the series. It doesn't feel anything like a Final Fantasy, with the exception of Sid and the Chocobos.
AKA Kookaboos.
Yeah, I grew up saying Kookaboos. So if you ever hear me say Kookaboo, I'm talking about Chocobos.
I had to bring that in. Yeah.
So I refuse to learn. I appreciate it. I thought about doing it, but I'm like, no. Paul shall do it.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not predictable. I'm consistent. Thank you.
There you go. I would say yes. You surprise me daily, Paul.
Wait, what?
I could just look into your eyes forever. Pregnant pause. Okay, so
Well, that got weird.
no, it didn't. Don't make it weird.
There's nothing weird about a Gregonant pause, okay?
So, Final Fantasy 3. I love this game. Final Fantasy 1 was cool, but by the time I beat Final Fantasy 3, I had to set the controller down, exhale, and just say, wow, I love this. So this is the first one that really developed the job class system. Onion Knights, Dark Knights, I should say Warriors, Monks, Black Mage, White Mage, Dragoons, Vikings, just a whole lot of stuff. There's, I want to say 12 to 15 different job classes. Again, I could be mistaken.
Oh, wow.
This was an NES title that never got brought to America, not until later on through ROM hacks and various ports. The graphics are not great. The character sprites for your 4 Warriors of Light, yes, they introduce that, which I haven't even talked about the crystals. There's usually crystals in all the Final Fantasies, and they're usually elemental based, earth, wind, fire, water. But the crystals have chosen these 4 Warriors of Light to save the Earth from the coming darkness. Later on through the game, as you've gotten different job classes and advanced the levels and the story, you find out that there has to be a balance between light and dark, and that previously the light was trying to overtake everything, and there were 4 Warriors of Darkness. An aspect that I loved of the story, because you always think of light being the redeeming, hopeful, perfect thing, but then you think there has to be balance for the dark world to exist as well, and the dark world does not necessarily equate to evil things. It's just the opposite side of the coin of existence, and I loved it. I fell hard for this game. You start off on this world that is not overly large, and then you find out it is a floating continent. They introduce a lot of side characters. You can still only have 4 people in your squad, but there are side characters, Princess Sarah and a number of other people, who become your unofficial 5th. They will, from time to time, pop in and attack characters or heal your party, depending on the version that you're playing, and they'll give you other directions, and you can call upon them to just discuss things, and they might give you hints to help advance the story or tell you where you next need to go. You then leave the floating continent to the lower Earth. You've got to find these small little bits of land that are otherwise, hard to find because they didn't really have a great map system back then, but it did exist. And then in time, you drain the water from the land, and it's really hard to explain, but it's a beautiful story. The characters you start off with at the beginning pretty much are your characters throughout the entire thing, except for your rotating 5th. And by the time you get to the end, you're fighting a cloud of darkness with some banging double Ds.
What?
That's the story, dude.
Okay.
Look, I don't even want to know anymore because now I want to experience these double Ds, and I don't even know what I'm trying to experience here.
Oh, dude. No, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. It's the cloud of darkness that's trying to overtake the world, and as the 4 Warriors of Light, you got to beat this chesty person's ass. It's pretty cool.
Oh, hey. Was there anything from the second game that carried over, mechanic-wise? Like the dialogue system or anything like that, or no?
No, the memorization thing did not carry over. The level up system was more akin to the first one, where you just fight, you get experience, and then you level up at certain intervals. As you level up, your magic users get better and more proficient at magic. Yeah, no, it's
interesting.
Yeah, to me, it's the original version of what the job class or system in Final Fantasy V was. It was like the rubric for it. It was groundbreaking for that, and then perfected in 5, which we'll get to 5 later.
Right.
But the story was great for 3. The characters were endearing, and they each kind of had their own plots, so the character development was there. Yeah, there were ways to cheese it and become OP'd as well, but it wasn't near as grindy as 2. And I just thought it was, to me, the first addicting Final Fantasy game. With 1, it was cool. 2, I was never addicted, but 3, I was like, man, I can't wait to get back to that.
See, I played 3, but I thought it was like Crystal Chronicles or something like that you had on GameCube. I used to confuse them, and I don't know why, but I had it on a DS. I remember my friends like, hey, EB Games, he'd always he was like playing the auction house. He always would find ways to like game the system. So he'd get like a refurb Nintendo DS for like $25. And it was just, just insane how the stuff you do. Like it's like the coupon clippers, where they spend more time figuring it out than actually doing it. So it's like, why don't you just, work that amount of time? But anyways, he he ended up getting a DS for me, and this is one of the games I had. And I didn't realize it, so I started playing it, and I was bartending. And bartending during the days, you don't do anything. You wipe down your bar, and pretty much that was it. At least here. And so I had a lot of time, and I spent 3 hours of my 6-hour shift getting to this cave. I got stuck in the cave, and I saved in there. Then I had no healing items, and I kept on dying, and I couldn't get out of the cave to buy more healing items because I was too far away. So I basically locked myself in there and had to start over. So I started the game, and I never played it again after that. But the thing is, it seemed pretty cool. I liked it. I just never got back into it. I think by then I was kind of salty at the whole handheld gaming thing too, because I was just way too many sore necks from staring down.
Sure. Yeah, they've ported it through to the DS. You can also download. I've got a copy of it on my iPhone, so I know you can buy it through their store. Of course, emulation, whatever. But my thing with the DS version, the graphics were good, but this is where they kind of introduced like the chibi or chibi looking characters. Like the characters are kind of adult, but they're designed to look like Precious Moments characters for anybody who's familiar with that reference. So they look like children, but some of them have breasts. And I think it was Princess Sarah. They designed her boobies, and she's got these boobies, but she looks way too. It's very creepy because they like gave her cleavage, is what I'm saying. Not just that character has breasts. It's they gave her cleavage that was out, like, I don't know. I did not care for it. I hear somebody's computer clicking. Is somebody Googling this?
I mean, now I got to look up this game. Like,
Yeah. So to me, that was one thing where I'm like, this is uncomfortable. I don't like this at all.
They have a very, I want to say, androgynous look to all the characters. Like, I thought they were all female first, and then I was like
pear-shaped, right?
Yeah, so it's the precious moments. Yeah, you nailed it there. But I think we'll talk about it later on. But I think that's one thing that threw me off of it a bit is they lean into the chibi thing is one thing, but they kind of make the chibi art, and then they have the super cute art, and then they have this super cute, I want to say, mood to the game. Like you don't get that with Final Fantasy 4 and 6 so much. And that's what I have more experience with. Like, 4, you have chibi art. And then you go and you get into a battle with a boss, and all of a sudden, this dude's got like a demon horse carrying a chariot with like a headless ghost. It's like, this is fucking badass. And so, it's just, it kind of offset it a little bit for me. And the chibi art in 3, it was just a bit too much for me. Like World of Final Fantasy, it's 100% chibi, and all the voices are really tiny and cute. Like they all sound like munchkins, and it's cute, but it's too much for me. If that's anything. Like I don't like the super realistic 11, 12, 13, like all the more modern ones, and I don't like this 100% chibi. I like that mix, a little bit of both.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point because it also goes back to what we were saying about the graphics for the bad guys and the boss fights in Final Fantasy 1. When you have these very severe and awesome and awe-inspiring looking bad guys, and then you see them fighting these chibis, you're like, man, those kids are about to die.
Yeah.
They stand no chance. And yeah, I'm with you. I would completely agree. I think there needs to be a balance there. Jake, any comments or questions on 3?
No, I'm actually really interested in playing this one. I think I started it once, but it was the NES, and it was a really bad translation patch, so I kind of just fell off it. Since then, it's been on the DS, and I think you said Game Boy Advance. I'm kind of interested in trying again. I love the job system. Mm-hmm. That's my favorite part of the Final Fantasy franchise, is that. So I'd be really curious with a good story would be interesting.
Okay. Well, I hear what you say about loving the job system. I agree. But next is a game that you're not going to like then, Final Fantasy IV.
And you're right, I don't.
And I think you might be the only one I've ever talked to who hates this game.
See you later,
Final
guys.
Fantasy IV.
Sorry, I had to.
No, I've gone on record several times as saying Final Fantasy IV I think is a damn near perfect game and definitely my favorite game of all time. It was originally released as Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo platform, as the original Final Fantasies 2 and 3 were not brought over to North America at that time. So they said, well, we're not going to explain, that leap, and we're not going to bring those over, so we're just going to rename this one Final Fantasy II. So, Super Nintendo, major update in graphics and music, and music, I will say, from the very first game, is something that the franchise has really been able to hang its hat on. So many memorable songs throughout the franchise leading up to 4. 4 definitely delivers and expounds and improves on all of them. Sid, of course, is in this game as his kind of horny engineer, cantankerous old guy character. You are a Dark Knight who is disgraced and thrown out of his kingdom, who then goes to deliver a package to a small village to try to gain favor with his king again, only to find out it is a bomb that is to kill the summoners. And shit ensues from there. You have a best friend who's a bit of an asshole, easily manipulated, and you never know whether or not he's going to be, in your party. You've got a love interest who is not the damsel in distress, which I love that. She is a character that supports the entire squad as a white mage, but also is not just there to be saved by your main character, Cecil, who, again, is this Dark Knight whose heart is tainted by all the blood that he spilled, and just the greatest redemption arc, in my opinion, of any Final Fantasy character is the character of Cecil as he becomes a warrior of light, aka a paladin.
Not to be confused with a paladin.
Right. There's a brother who is as easy to manipulate as your best friend, and you start to think Cecil just has a type. And there's Redia, who is multiple people's waifu.
But only mine that counts, so.
No, so it's a great game, great music, amazing story. There are some leaps in logic that have to be taken. I don't mind taking those leaps. At some point, you think everybody's dead. And at some point, various points usually, you find out, they're fine. All except, like 1 or 2 people. So, yeah, the game is not without its faults. But in my opinion, just it's not perfect, but it's very close. This game I can play 10,000 times, and I've probably come close to it. Never seems to get old. There's a port for the DS that somehow is even better, and the voice acting there is fantastic. They have a different augment system, and a lot of stuff we don't have time to get into. But yeah, if you're going to start off with Final Fantasy IV, but you don't want to do one of the old ones, do this one. It's a great game. Jake, what do you think? How am I wrong?
So I've been
Paul,
thinking
what are
of
your
this.
thoughts?
I think that we are correct.
Thank you.
I don't hate it. I think my issue with it is an issue I have with, I think, all JRPGs that I try and go back to play now. I don't like the grinding in combat. In fact, the only JRPG I think I like to play now is Chrono Trigger, because the combat is fairly light and you can avoid encounters. So I don't think Final Fantasy IV is bad. The story is decent. The music, you're absolutely right, is just amazing. The opening scene with the Red Wings, the airships coming in, that's a theme that I still have pop in my head when I'm playing the lesser games, right? Like the theme, and it had character themes and stuff, which is something the series is known for. It's a good game. To go back and play it now is difficult for me because of the amount of hours it takes. And I'm wondering if the remakes would be better for me. I would be curious to hear the voice acting, because it's one of those games where you have the voices in your head doesn't line up with the voice acting.
I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to like the voice acting for Kain, because I know you like World of Warcraft, Mr. I don't like grinding. So I'm calling you out it today. I'm going to dig deep. No, but the voice for Kain is the voice for Illidan from from World of Warcraft.
Oh, is it really? I actually like that actor too.
That's probably my only complaint about the voice acting in the remake, or like in the DS version, is because Kane's voice is so fucking badass compared to the rest that it just makes everything else seem so cheesy.
Okay, yes. Kane is awesome. Golbez, I think, is probably also there in terms of just like when that character speaks, you have to listen because they wrote him well. The voice acting is great. Edge, for all of his pomp and douchebaggery, when his parents die, his guttural screams are really well done and like breathtaking. Like, it kind of cuts you short. It's pretty awesome. And of course the augment system. But Jake, I have to say, if you're going to go back and play the game, I don't think you should play any of the remakes. If you don't want to sink a lot of hours into it, The Final Fantasy II, the original one released in the US, is considered the easy type. You shouldn't have to grind too much. You can get a lot of money by an item duplication glitch if you ever want to cheese it. But if you want to go all the way through it, I think you should play that one. If you want a fully immersive, outstanding, fun experience, yes, do the DS remake. But if you just want to get through it to say you've gotten through it, play the classic. It's hard to die.
I'm not terrible at games, I promise.
No. I don't think you were. You said with all the grinding, this game is nowhere near as grindy as 1 or 2.
Yeah, if you play the Super Nintendo like Final Fantasy II US version, there's no grind necessary. You can go straight on through.
And there is no job class. I know I said that at the beginning of the discussion on 4. Who your characters are, just who they are. It's who their background is. It's kind of like their lot in life for their particular kingdoms. Of course, Cecil being the exception as he transitions from Dark Knight to a paladin or paladin. But yeah, I think this is a great game. And this is the first time that by the time the game ends, you really are invested enough in the characters to want to watch and examine every bit of the screen for the closing sequence. Like, the resolution of the game is such a rewarding experience, even more so than 3.
Ooh, I don't know about that. I really like the ending to 6.
No. I mean actual Final Fantasy 3.
No, never mind. Carry on.
Okay, so we're going to get back to the job class system then with Final Fantasy 5, unless anybody else has any final thoughts on 4.
I'm mistaking people for the voice actors now, apparently, because I'm looking it up. I mean, checking my Mind Palace, and I don't know what's going on. So.
Well, even if it's not the same character or actor who does those two characters, it's similar, I'm guessing, is what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty dope. I'm gonna have to check it out afterwards, but yeah, it's intense. It's intense.
All right, so 5. 5, where to start? There are these flying potatoes that, well, they're meteors, but they look like 16-bit potatoes that crash into Earth. You've got kind of this rapscallion on his own with his chocobo who's investigating. He finds the dude who's got amnesia. They go on all sorts of adventures. There's a princess trying to save her dad. And then there's a pirate dude who ends up being a chick. And this is such a wonderful game. One of my favorite characters in all of Final Fantasydom is Galuf, who is the old man, as mentioned, with amnesia. He ends up being from a different planet that is similar to Earth, where he is a king. And long story short, Galuf and 3 of his buddies came to our planet to stop this character named X-Death, who turns out is a tree. I know, it's very bizarre. Some of the plot twists are not very satisfying in this game, but a lot of the game is really dope. So they sealed X-Death away, and they used like the 4 crystals, which again are our theme, and mankind then kind of progressed over the next 30 years, developing these machines to amplify the elements of the different crystals, and the crystals stop working and eventually break. Each time you collect a different crystal shard, you get a different job class. There are 20 some odd job classes. They're very well fleshed out. There are different ability systems and different things that you can learn and equip to different characters. Infinite customization, yes. I almost said customization ability. But anyway, infinite customization in this game. Amazing characters, great plots, and this is the funniest of the Final Fantasy games, in my opinion. There are a lot of both highbrow and lowbrow jokes, which the characters in the game don't mind stopping to like break fourth wall, look at you, and kind of give you the old wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's incredibly charming. This is a fun romp of an adventure with a lot of cool story parts, a couple of lame-ass story parts, and ultimately a very, very cool way to spend 60 hours.
What was the main character's name again?
Well, it depends on which translation. It's Butts. It's Butts. B-U-T-Z.
Yeah.
And he's cool. He ends up being...
I never got this far.
Oh, okay. Well, you can
spoilers.
Delete that. Maybe put some sort of music over that. But there's a lot of cool reveals and a lot of big payoffs in this game. I'll let you guys talk or ask questions for a bit, and then I'll get back to it.
I mean, I guess I can start on this one. I've actually never finished it. When I first got into emulation, when I first realized what the hell that was, this is one of the first games I played, and my mind was blown that there's more than just Final Fantasy 2 and 3, or like the US versions, right, on Super Nintendo. I really need to go back and finish it. I love the job system. I didn't realize there's so many jobs in it. Over 20 is insane.
Yeah, I was blown away because I thought I had them all, and next thing you know, hey, there's like another 6. Whoa.
Yeah, that's crazy. I need to go back to it. I was kind of thrown off the plot a little bit. It's not as good of a plot as 4 had. At least I didn't think so back then. The names of the characters kind of bugged me, but I don't like Galuf either. But I never really gave it an honest chance to get through to see where the story goes. I like how, right from the get-go, at the beginning of our talk, a lot of these Final Fantasy games mix the magic with the science. There's always a mech or steampunk tech somewhere in these games, and I love that. 5 is great, I agree. Like, from what I played from it, it was really good. I definitely need to go back to it.
Yes, highly recommended. What you're saying about the job class system, exactly right. The only other Final Fantasy entry that I think has a job system this well done is Tactics. 3 was great for the job class, but this perfected it, and Tactics went in a different direction with it, but still did it well. Yeah, it's because of the different amounts or the sheer number of job classes that are available. It's not a grind-heavy game unless you decide you want it to be.
Right.
Now, the payoffs for grinding are staggering, and you can become OP'd, again, rather easily, so long as the metric for easiness is time. You know, I will say, by the time we got to the final fight with X-Death, it did actually take me, I think, 3 or 4 attempts to finally get a system down to beat him. You know, you have to mix and match your job classes, your abilities, your armor, and stuff like that. But yeah, this game is one that I could see being the most replayable for different experiences. 4 I could play forever just because I like the story. 6 we'll get to. But this one, you could play it 10,000 different ways because just the customization of it.
If you like the job system with the 2D combat, check out Bravely Default. I think it was on the Game Boy Advance or 3DS. The second one, not so much, but the first one, very solid. It has some links to the Final Fantasy series in terms of, like, I think the graphic designer and the music, I believe. Huh. But it has the job system and it has that combat like in 5. It's really great. It has a great story, and I always think of Bravely Default as a successor to Final Fantasy 5 because, like, after 5 they kind of went in a different direction with the classes.
Well, and you've mentioned we keep talking about music. You mentioned the composer Nobuo Uematsu, who is just a staggering talent. And anytime, if you guys and gals are not familiar with Final Fantasy music, you can find just about any version. It's been covered and copied 10,000 different ways. Heavy metal version, melodic ballads. There's an entire symphony orchestra that tours around with Nobuo, I believe, doing shows. And it is emotionally charged. It is sweeping. It can be heavy. It can be anything that you need it to be. There's a song for every musical taste, and they're all well done. Pauls, what do you got for me?
I was trying to think, to be honest. Now I'm distracted between... I was about to objectify a couple characters.
Do it.
Because first, I wanted to go, like, what's the sexiest job for Ferris? And then, what is the most gruff, badass job for Galuf?
Oof.
We'll figure that out afterwards. I want to save that one for Discord discussion. That's more fun.
Well, okay, I was going to say, well, not ninja. They are covered head to toe.
Yeah.
So we'll transition on from 5 to 6. If anybody has not heard of Final Fantasy 6, what have you been doing with your life? I think 6 is widely regarded as the best of the classics. For me, the classics are 1 through 9. And I think if anybody were to say 6 is not worth its time, there would be an entire community of people who are just ready to not give a shit about anything you think in life. 6 is a very interesting story about, again, a woman with amnesia being utilized by an evil empire. She then goes on adventures with a treasure hunter, I guess is the proper way to say it.
Thief.
Yeah, right?
No, he's a treasure hunter. He's a treasure hunter.
A world-renowned treasure hunter. A pair of brothers who are royalty. One is a jock. The other one is probably a pedophile. There's a playable Moogle. There is a feral child. There is a Yeti. There is a mime, which is a callback from Final Fantasy V. There's Celeste. There's so many great characters. I don't even know where to begin. We don't have time to talk about all of them. All you need to know. I'm sorry, I'm in my head about this. The only thing you need to know about Final Fantasy VI is the challenge was to write a character sadder than the character that you just met. Nobody has a happy story in this game. And I would normally hate that, but it is one thing that links them all, and they all can identify that within each other. And in that way, I love it. But yeah, there are, no matter what part of life you're in, you could be like, fuck, that sucks for that character. And that would suck in real life. So anyway, that's that. There is a summoning system that is unique. You have to collect these like crystalline items called magicite, which are like the dead husks of the different summons that you can get. By equipping summons, you can learn different magics and have different stat boosts. Other than that, it's a classic Final Fantasy, except there are no elemental crystals. It's the first time I think of the franchise that we don't have mention of that.
Well, the magicite, I think, takes the place of the elemental crystals because the first few you get are elemental based, right?
Well, yeah.
Ifrit and Shiva and all that.
Yeah, but it's typically with the crystals and the other ones, they are the plot points or the plot devices,
Right.
whereas the Espers here are a thing that you can do, and you can choose whether or not. But they don't necessarily drive the story the way the crystals do in 4 or 3 or 5, how they break, and then the waters don't churn anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And typically there's only 4, or in the case of Final Fantasy IV, 8 different crystals. But yeah, I guess that's a good point. I haven't thought of that. One of the other things that makes 6 stand out amongst its peers is the bad guy, Kefka, one of the greatest villains of all time,
Easily.
succeeds in his evil, diabolical plan.
Yeah.
And the game doesn't begin or end there. It happens right in the middle. And then the second half of the game, once you've gotten all these characters and you've fallen in love with all these different people, you lose them all and you can choose which ones you want to go back and pick up. And being who I am, I usually try to get the whole squad back together. But there are challenges where you just have to beat the game with the 3 people. Because I think there are 3 required characters to be able to unlock the end of the story. But this is a very unique game. It doesn't necessarily look like the others. It plays a little bit different. The plot points are different. The music, still done by Nobuo Uematsu, is rendered a little bit differently, but still slaps and hits all of the emotional bones in my heart. And I can't say enough good stuff about this. I've said this 1,000 times, and I'll let you guys talk in a moment. Where 4 is my favorite, I will concede 6 is a better game. And where I say 4 is almost a perfect game, if 4 is a 9.8, 6 is probably a 10, but it's at least a 9.9.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, 100%.
Tell me about it, Paul. Tell me your thoughts and feelings, and feel free to go a little bit more in depth with anything I just very briefly glossed over.
Well, I like it because I'm not going to look at a game and try to pick it apart to the point where it's like, oh, this is stupid. You can't use this kind of logic. Like, oh, why didn't they just do it? It's kind of like when someone says, oh, why didn't they just fly a griffin to Mount Doom or whatever it was for Lord of the Rings. I don't like those kinds of thoughts. What if, I just want to work with what you're given as opposed to what you're not given. So I really like what they supply in that game. All the characters, all the music, all the arcs that they go through. Everybody has these, I don't want to say depressing stories. Some of them are, others aren't. I remember Jake saying how he didn't think Gao is a depressing character, and I thought that was the coolest summary of the entire game to me, is because yeah, he has shit happen to him, but he doesn't care. He keeps on going, keep on trucking kind of thing. Locke is probably one of my favorite characters, not to play as, but just personally, he's one of the ones I kind of relate to more than the rest. And I'm just okay, yeah, he's lost his love and he's trying to bring her back to life, and he's not got a chip on his shoulder for the world, trying to be oh, I lost the one I love, so I'm gonna destroy the world kind of deal. That's what the villains end up doing. All of these characters have these significant losses in their life, and it makes them harder or more determined to save the world. And that's what I love about the game so much, is how well it does that. It just makes it not cheesy. It's not like one of those self-help stupid passive aggressive things you'll see posted on Facebook. It's it's genuinely. I don't want to say wholesome. It's what's the word? Inspiring for me. I really like it. I can't think of the terms. I can't put it into words succinctly enough. But I'm just like it just hits all the right bells for me.
Okay, I think what you're saying is a great point. The events of a character's life or the situations of a character's life do not necessarily dictate that person becomes a depressing character. Look at what
Right.
Cyan goes through. Cyan, for anybody who doesn't know, slight spoilers here, loses his wife and son to the evil empire, specifically Kefka, poisoning the water of their kingdom. He survives fighting for the kingdom and joins our band of freedom fighters, as it were, to avenge them. He does revisit that, if you decide to do his side quests, but at no point is he the woe is me character. With Gao, he was left in a field by his dad or his granddad or something like that. And you're right, I mean, as terrible as that is, he did adapt. He did, learn to run with the animals, and he's a very cool character. And he never stops to say, why am I not like all these other people? So that I get. I think character-wise, to really summarize what the game is about, is it all comes down to Terra. Terra is the one character who has the exact same point of every other character in that it's the question of, is it worth it to go on? And that, to me, is what the entirety of Final Fantasy VI is about. You see person after person either lose people or just be a product of horrible, horrible situations and circumstances. And then Terra, while she is a little bit of that, the one question she continuously poses in her inner dialogue is, should I go on? Is it worth it? The world gets destroyed. Do we still do we rebuild, or do we just try to go with what it is, or do we just give up? And that is why I love the Terra character so much. She's that unifying link to all of them, and she speaks to the audience in a way that I don't think any other Final Fantasy character ever had.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. They all have that moment where they confront basically their own death, right? Their despair, where they want to give up and move on. For me, the one that stands out of the two are Ceres. After the world of ruin opens up and she washes ashore on that island and she's nursed back to health. If depending on how you play that sequence, spoilers, Cid dies and she basically climbs to the top of a mountain and is contemplating suicide, basically. But it ultimately becomes a leap of faith as she leaps off the cliff into the waters and survives. And that gives her the drive to continue on. That's really interesting.
And that's one thing I never realized too, is that you can save him, which I've done, and he can die, which I've done.
Well, when you save, it's funny though, because like you catch the fish. If you get the fast ones and feed him nothing but fast fish, he survives. You get a raft, and she kind of just waves by and leaves.
Yeah,
You completely miss the entire point of the entire sequence.
yeah, it's a much more compelling story if Cid dies. I'm not gonna lie, it's
Yeah.
like story-wise, I think it's even better for the game. Excuse me, hiccup. I'm not getting choked up. No, no, it's seriously so much better if you actually have him die. It sounds morbid, but it's kind of like, okay, if he lives, okay, let's go. I built your raft. Here you go, like you said.
Yeah.
And otherwise, if he dies, like there's this contemplation of suicide. There's this, do I give up here and all this stuff? So, what Mega Man, I almost said.
What Mega Man?
Yeah. No, it's just really cool that there's that much of a difference in a game like this, especially when this is still like the era of a lot of stuff being censored in video games. So when they touch on these heavier subjects, I'm just like, that hits home even more for me. Then I'm like, oh wow, they actually put this in there. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I think also as far as final bosses go, Final Fantasy VI has the best final boss for me.
Oh yeah.
It's just colossal tower of amalgamating creatures, and you work your way up in stages, and at the top is just Kefka, who's literally a god at that point.
Yeah.
And they just make him look so menacing, but he's still clown-like. And the music is amazing in this game. I love this game.
Yeah. The music is great. The character artwork is fantastic for the Kefka fight. One other thing that's very unique there that I always thought was cool is if you go and you assemble your whole squad, I think it's 14 different characters, you put them in the order that you would like them to fight. So you have your 4 that are starting the fight. But if at any point one of them dies and then you advance to the next level of the boss fight, they bring in whoever you had in the 5th spot, then the 6th, and 7th, and 8th. So in that way, it can be kind of hard to lose that fight, but it's one of those things kind of like 5 where it becomes infinitely customizable. You can spend more time developing this character, not this character, or you can give yourself challenges like, I've done this and I've failed every time. I'm going to try to beat Kefka using only the 4 characters that will do randomized attacks. You know, like the Yeti guy, Mog, Gao, and Go-Go, who, you know, you can just mime. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do in this game. The side quests are not always necessary, but they are, well, they're side quests, but they are very, very rewarding. This game, in a way similar to what Final Fantasy VII does, it nails the grind. It can be grindy if you let it be, but the rewards for it are apt. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any final comments on 6 before we go to 7?
Just play it.
Yeah, I agree. If you could only play one Final Fantasy game, I know I should say 4, but I got to say 6.
Yeah, same.
Easily 6.
Unless you're just already wildly down in the dumps, in which case play 4, and then go back and play 6. Okay, Final Fantasy VII. A very odd protagonist in Cloud falls in love with one of 2 people, dates Barrett, I guess you'd call him his coworker, if you choose. Goes on an adventure of self-discovery while accumulating other misfits / terrorists, all to topple not an evil empire, but an evil company that is hell-bent on profiting off of things that require you, well, no, not require you, that destroy the earth.
See, that's why this game is ahead of its time, or ahead of the rest, because the old ones are old school. Your empire was like this old force, this old, like, king or nobleman or emperor, and then the empire becomes, Walmart.
Yeah.
But for some reason they do it right, and, you know, they realize, it's like, yeah, Shinra's bad.
Yeah, Shinra's this giant company that is mining, for lack of a better word, life force out of the planet. So instead of like oil, like we would have here on Earth, whenever you die, your spirit goes into the ground, and they pump it up to, you know, power their lights and their machines. And you start off being employed as a mercenary for a group called Avalanche, which is labeled as a terrorist group because they're trying to blow up the reactors that convert life energy into, or the life stream into energy. And then you're in this giant city called Midgar. You escape. There's a whole open world thing. There's a legendary soldier named Sephiroth, who's an amazing antagonist. Cloud feels like he is connected to him somehow. Spoiler alert, I think he is. And yeah, Tifa is amazing. That's what I got from that story. You can read, I mean, side quests in this game, amazing. And this game, better than any other Final Fantasy, does the grinding right. Does it perfectly. Amazing, albeit confusing story. Beautiful world. The world development for this game is amazing. The different, you know, places that you have to go. The characters are great. Sid, of course, being the old cuss that he is here. There are some hints that let you think that Sid is actually related to Kain from Final Fantasy IV. There are, God, guys, I don't even know where to start. This game is so big and such a giant leap forward from the previous 6. It is its own thing. It is a powerhouse. It is a memorable experience. And by the time you are done, you are ready to weep because it is beautiful in so many ways.
It's easy to get lost. It's like if you're not paying attention. I know a lot of people complain about Cloud and they don't understand a lot of his arc and stuff. And they're like, oh, this is dumb. But it's also really confusing. If you don't pay attention during a couple of cutscenes, all of a sudden you can miss out enough information that it doesn't quite make sense. And you can pick a whole bunch of holes and you'll be like, I don't get this. And so you really got to actually pay attention to it actively. And I think that's part of what immersed me in the game, especially like the first time I was in high school, so like grade 10, grade 11, borrowed it from a friend, just grinding nonstop. But I played a quarter of the time recently over like the last year, 2 years, something like that when I was playing it. And for the fact that I was just being so much more attentive to it, that's what actually made me enjoy it even more, is not the time that I put into it, but how much detail and how many different ways that the game I want to say branched off and developed characters and developed the world. So
Yeah. No, it's great. This is one where, in a way that was similar to Final Fantasy VI, each character got their own specific treatment. The way that they developed the characters, did the backstory, worked as their character. I think, honest to God, Barrett from Final Fantasy VII is the single greatest character development arc they have ever done in the series. From what I've played, from 1 to 10. He starts off as this angry guy who is willing to destroy the entire world so that he can raise his daughter in a world that he thinks is worthy of her. And by the time it ends, you have watched him grow and develop, and you learn why he is the way he is, and you see where he was wanting to go and how he's adapted to where it is he needs to go. I think that's fantastic. I love the Barrett character for no other reason than his journey. You're right, there are a couple parts where if you're not paying attention to the way things are worded, you can be a bit confused. And this is just ultimately a case of, while Cloud is not a shitty protagonist, you look at just how staggeringly cool Sephiroth is, and you're like, man, what could have been, So, but the people around Cloud, I think it's definitely the ancillary characters that make this game special and great. And developing and finding their side quests and stories is great. I think this game nails, like I said, grinding, but also exploration. It is rewarding. It is not obvious all the time. There are things within things within things, and you can, ultimately decide how far you want to go with this game. And if you sink enough time into it, yes, you can become much more powerful than the final boss.
It's one of those games where I've played it several times now, and I still don't quite understand how Cloud is related to Sephiroth and the whole bit. It's confusing. I'm actually curious about the remake that's been in progress, whether that's going to flesh out some of that part. That part notwithstanding, everything else, you're right. The other characters is what makes this game for me as well. The arc with Sid and the rocket takeoff sequence is, I just get choked up. It's great. This is another game where every character has that theme that just sits in your brain. Like I can still recall all the themes of all the characters in Final Fantasy VII, maybe more so than 7. I really do love the music in these games, and it's very cinematic. This is the first Final Fantasy that really brought in those cinematics. I mean, it was on the PlayStation, and that's kind of like the standard for all of them now. They all have these big cinematic sequences, right. And it's a solid game. It also, next to the job system from old games, the materia system I really dig. I think it's amazing. It's very customizable how you plunk in the crystals. I kind of wish they'd flesh out a bit more of it, because it's the kind of game where you want to cast fire spells, put in a fire gem. You want to cast it as an AoE, put a Linka gem to it. I wish there was more of that in there. I've said before in this podcast that Path of Exile, which is a wildly different game, borrows the materia-like system for their game, and it's the same vibe for me in terms of like the customability. I love it. I love the materia system a lot. Love the music.
I agree.
And the mini games. There's so many mini games in this.
Yeah, like they have the gold saucer, which is Disney in the Final Fantasy VII place, but without, it's just a place for minigames. And then there's, of course, minigames spread out outside of there throughout the world. Final Fantasy VII deals with ideas of transpermia, which is, the origin of life on Earth coming from a distant rock, which I thought was interesting. They label that race as the Ancients. And then, of course, one of the characters and love interest, potentially, depending on how you play it, is the last surviving descendant of the ancient bloodlines. Materia, as you mentioned, contain the knowledge of the ancients, and that way they're similar to Espers, whereas the powers and abilities of these magic beings or things are distilled into these crystalline forms. And yeah, I love that they have weapons and armor that have materia slots in them, and that you can chain different sequences of materia to give you different results, regarding if you're hitting every enemy or just one enemy. There's the magic, there's the summon, there's the support materias, there's the command materias, for counterattack or slice all or quadra-slice. I don't know. Yeah. That kind of shit I just love. In fact, of all the Final Fantasies, this is the one that I like to go back and give myself new challenges for. My favorite one so far is command materia only, the yellow materia. And I think if you can play a game with just those and forgo any magic, it's a much different game and it's not more fun, but it's still fun. I will say for me, the biggest weakness with this game are some of the cutscenes and the backstory. You can't skip them. So if you've played this game 20 times and you know every bit of every verse, when you leave Midgar, for example, and go to the first town of Calm, Cloud gives you some of his backstory from like 5 years ago. And even if you don't read it and you just button mash all the way through it, it's still going to take you 20 minutes.
Yeah.
More than any of the other Final Fantasies, this is the one game that has I'm just going to turn it off here because I don't want to do the next section. And then you just never end up picking it back up because you don't want to sit through it, But by the time you get to Disc 3, the world is open. The weapons, which are these giant defenders of the planet that awaken only when the planet faces like an extinction level event, you can go and you can kill those. And that's incredibly fun for some reason and scary. I don't know. There's a lot of emotion with this game. Well, like you were saying, I remember when the TV commercial for this game came out, the trailer or whatever, the 30-second spot. They showed a lot of the CGI, not the real world gameplay. And I just remember, I can still hear the voice when he says, Final Fantasy VII at the end, and the music swells, and it's just like, that alone was an event. If you don't know what I'm talking about, YouTube it. It's fantastic. But yeah, what a great, great game. I love it. I would give this one probably 8 out of 10, but an argument can be made for like 8.5. What do you guys think?
8.49.
What I really like about the series as a whole, like people harp on Final Fantasy for having all these, 1 through 16 coming out now, but they don't carry on the story from game to game usually. But that's what I like about it, because they're taking themes that go all the way back to the first game with like I said, the mechs and the science and the magic mixed together. Later on, it's the evil empire oppressing people. Then it's like the signs of confronting death. There's a lot of themes that carry from game to game, and they kind of just shake things up and retell the story with a different spin. And I like most of it. I think it's really well done. And 7's just another take on the evil empire story. It's really well done.
Yeah, they kind of gave it the Lex Luthor treatment. For anybody who doesn't really understand that reference, Lex Luthor, back in the 30s and 40s when Superman was invented, was this mad scientist. And that spoke
Was
to...
he really?
Yeah, well, and that spoke to the fears of what science was capable of. It was the age of the atom. You had the nuclear bomb and all that kind of stuff. So the scientists, if they went rogue, obviously that's who you fear. And then in the 60s and all of that kind of, hippie culture, it became the corruption of business. So they transferred Lex Luthor from that to being a businessman. And then in the 90s and all that to a politician. So
Right.
It's really just the zeitgeist of whatever you should be most afraid of, whatever is most likely to dick with you. And so you're exactly right. They transitioned it from the empire or the kingdom, from these kind of medieval steampunk stories, to the corrupt business system, which is a very interesting take. And I agree. I think it was very well executed. Posh, what do you think?
7 out of 8.
No, we're only doing 1 through 7, so this is 7 out of 7. I'm kidding.
No, I mean, there's nothing I can add to that, really. I looking back at it, as I didn't like it as much. Now I do. I just didn't want to go through the grind. I was maybe channeling my inner Cornelius. I don't know. But I played the game, and I just enjoyed the story. Now will I play the remake? I still haven't played it. I don't have a PS4, but I will play it eventually. I'm looking forward to it because I want to see how they've changed it and in what ways, because there are, plot holes, the way they wrote it. It's a little tangly, you can pick anything apart if you want to try hard enough. But I just want to see how they tidied it up, because they obviously know how big of an influence it was, because it's not as linear as the previous games, and that's part of what appealed to a lot of people, all the side quest stuff. If you didn't like Barrett's side quests and you didn't care about his overall story arc, don't use them. It's kind of things like that. But at the same time, all those characters, they have their individual lines in the game. It's not like Final Fantasy VI, where your actual party members say the exact same thing regardless of who you have in there. So I like that everybody had a voice in the game, and that's kind of cool. And looking back on it, I wanted to play as Cloud, Sid, and Vincent, and I didn't want to do anything else. I maxed those guys out. Now I'm like, hey, I want to play as Barrett. I want to play as Red. So it's going back after all this time. It has given me just a different viewpoint to go through it, and that's why I like playing these older games that I loved so much as a kid, because I get to experience them again and experience them in a different light, but at the same time, the same. So it's a strange trade-off sometimes, but that's what I enjoy the most about going back to these games.
Well, yeah, you nailed it, man. If you don't like what Barrett is doing, or if you don't like him as a character, play as Eris. By the time you get to Disc 3, Eris is at a completely different place than it was when you found her in Disc 1.
Fact.
That said, also, one thing that I wasn't crazy about when I was younger, I've kind of grown to appreciate it now, is how ambiguous the ending is of the game. The life force takes over, tries to save the planet, but then the game itself pretty much just asks the player, is humanity worth saving, or is it a threat to the planet? You know, all these things that were going to destroy the planet came about solely because of man. It's existential, of course, but it's interesting in the way that it is given to you. It's not holier than thou, and it's not overly heavy-handed, but there's a definite theme of, can the world differentiate between good people and bad people, or do we have to do that? To address what you said about the remake, I'm excited for what they're going to do. I haven't played it, as I don't own a PS4, but I would buy a PS5 solely for this game. I've never committed to buying a console just for one game, but I would absolutely do that for Final Fantasy VII. And I hope all of the episodes do come out before the PlayStation 6, because then I'll just be pissed otherwise.
Cross your fingers.
Right, yeah, right. I don't know what their timetable is, but I'm excited about it. I've watched some people stream bits and pieces of the first episode for the PS4, and it looks gorgeous and looks like a ton of fun. So, guys and gals, I know this has been a bit of a longer episode. Before I wrap up, Jake, Paulsch, was there anything else you wanted to say about 7?
No, I think we covered it.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. We tried to shoehorn a lot into our usual 1 hour space. We went a bit over. I thank you all for your patience and your input. And still, there's 60 more hours that I could talk about probably each and every single one of these damn games. That said, Final Fantasy has a very special place in my heart. Watching cousins play it growing up, Final Fantasy IV is basically how I learned how to read. I'm still in the middle of playing 6 on my marathon, but of course I played 6 and 7 a lot, so I didn't mind doing this episode now. But I know that by the time I'm finished with 7, I'll be in a contemplative place and probably emotional for looking back and just playing these games straight through in order, as I've never done that before. So if you are somebody who has access to your emotional proclivities, Final Fantasy is definitely a way to go if you want to access those in video games. Let's go through and have Sick Jake go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, when I'm not in Vegas as part of Stomp or Cirque du Soleil, you can find me on Twitter and sometimes on Twitch at SickJake, SICJAKE.
Very good, thank you, sir. And Paulsch109, tell them where they can find you, sir.
You can find me streaming on Twitch at twitch.tv/werewolf. That's WAREWULFF. Wait.
Why are you acting sus?
You can find him there more often than me. I'm over there as well. Twitch.tv/Palsh109. That's PALSH109.
Very cool. And my name is Guy Prime for The Retro Therapy. That's on Twitch.tv/The Retro Therapy, or any social medias. And of course, here on Press B to Cancel. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody stay tuned for next week's episode as well. Can't wait to keep bringing you all this amazing content. Until then, thank you. Have a good night.
Special thanks for music. Go to Arthur the Last Ancient on Spotify or The Last Ancient on Bandcamp. For more episodes, please visit our website at pressbtocancel.com. As well, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe at Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, or anywhere else you'd like to listen to your favorite shows. As always, thank you. This has been
Press B to cancel.
Press B to